Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can discuss the Jake Paul situation, including this FBI raid that occurred in August of 2020. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So here we'll go through the background of Jake Paul, then look at some of the controversies that he's been involved in, including the situation with the FBI. Jake Paul was born in Cleveland, Ohio on January 17, 1997. He grew up in a suburb of Cleveland. So at the time of making this video, he's 23 years old. Jake Paul and his brother Logan Paul started posting videos on a social media network that is now defunct. It was called Vine. Jake Paul moved to Los Angeles to continue to build his career as a social media influencer and was on a comedy series on the Disney Channel for a year and a half. In 2017, he formed a group of other influencers called Team 10. I guess the name Team Impulsive was already taken. Jake Paul lives in Calabasas, California, in a $6.9 million mansion that he bought in 2017. Other people appear to live there as well, like people who work for him or work with him. Seems like a hectic place. He moved there after living in a house that he rented for about $18,000 a month. The neighbors complained about a lot of noise and other disturbances. The neighbors were debating whether to file a class action public nuisance lawsuit when Paul moved to the mansion. So he appeared to make an impression on the neighborhood. When Vine closed down in 2017, he was able to transition over to YouTube, and he has built a massive following on that platform. He has over 20 million subscribers, almost 7 billion lifetime views. His rank is 167 out of about 31 million YouTube channels. On his channel, we see a variety of content. He has a number of music videos. He has videos where he's playing pranks and doing stunts. And then he has videos where I guess he is trying to capture some type of drama, adventure, strife, or general nonsense. A few examples of video titles: Oil Floor Slip Prank on Hot Roommates, I Broke My Rib Cage, and Homemade Giant Backyard Water Slide. I watched a number of his videos. They are different. If I were to try to summarize the content, I guess I would say something like the videos feature a number of young men and young women who stand around and talk, yell, and make a variety of facial expressions in and around a mansion. Now, during Jake Paul's career, he has had a few run-ins with law enforcement and found his way into other controversies. Jake Paul showcased his vast knowledge of mental health topics when he tweeted a message saying, "Remember, anxiety is created by you." He goes on to say that sometimes you have to let life play out, remind yourself to be happy, and the answers will come. He recommended going for a walk and talking to a friend to resolve anxiety issues. It's amazing. There are thousands of articles about anxiety, about what causes it, about how to treat it. And here, in just one statement, Jake Paul is able to confirm he's never read one of them. Paul has been involved in a variety of questionable businesses. He had this mystery box website promotion for a while. It received complaints. People said they didn't receive the prize that they won on the website. He also announced this business where he would help young people to become social influencers. It's like he wants to create little versions of himself. This seems to be a theme in his life. Now, in May of 2020, Paul was at a mall in Scottsdale, Arizona as part of the George Floyd protests. Some of the protesters started looting the mall. Video recordings show that Paul entered the mall, but he denied that he engaged in any looting. In June, he was charged with 2 misdemeanors in connection to that incident: unlawful assembly and trespassing. About a month later, the Scottsdale Police Department dismissed the charges without prejudice to allow the federal government to complete an investigation. Now, some people said this is good news for Paul. The charges were dropped. When the federal government takes over an investigation, it is almost always bad news for a defendant. This is not something that Paul would have wanted to happen. Facing the consequences for 2 misdemeanors is one thing, but the federal government is probably thinking about a much larger case. The same day that the charges were dropped, Paul's mansion in California was raided by the FBI. His lawyer said he was not there at the time. They raided an associate of his at the same time in Las Vegas. Los Angeles Sheriff's Department officers who assisted in the raid carried rifles and perhaps shotguns out of Paul's mansion. There's not a lot of information about this right now. It appears as though they were looking for video recordings of Paul and his associates in that mall in Arizona. Even though they seized the firearms, that doesn't appear to be part of the investigation. They may have done this simply to secure the scene. The question here becomes, how could 2 misdemeanor charges have led to a federal investigation, and why did the FBI need such a large number of SWAT team officers to raid Jake Paul's mansion? He hardly seems like a criminal mastermind, and the original charges were not related to anything violent. Well, there's no way to know, but I have 2 theories. First, from at least one of his videos on YouTube, it's clear that he does have firearms. It makes sense that the FBI would have watched some of these videos in preparation for the raid. Again, many of the videos are recorded in his mansion. In addition to the firearms, they may have observed much of the impulsive and irresponsible behavior that took place in some of those videos and thought to themselves, better to be safe than to be sorry. Another possibility is that the officers who were forced to watch the videos were traumatized by the content, and the FBI raided with such large numbers to express their rage about this trauma. I think this is less likely, but I don't know for sure. Those videos are pretty bad. They probably started watching thinking that because they have a career in law enforcement and have seen horrible things, nothing in those videos could frighten them. Yet, by the end, I bet they were second-guessing that logic. So at this point, it is worth noting that no charges have been filed against Jake Paul. I imagine the investigation will continue, but there's no way to know if it will lead to criminal charges or nothing will come of it. As I mentioned before, the Scottsdale police dismissed the charges without prejudice, which means they can refile those charges at any time within the statute of limitations. Now, this whole incident with the FBI doesn't look good, but there are a couple of other problems I wanted to mention. Jake Paul threw a large party at his house in July of 2020. There was no social distancing. The people who were there were not wearing masks. It's considered not only reckless, but disrespectful and indicative of a sense of entitlement. Responding to this controversy, he said, "I am not the type of person who is going to sit around and not live my life." Some may view this as narcissistic. He also owes over $2 million in unpaid federal taxes. That will put a significant dent in his $11 million net worth. Now, stepping back from all this and looking at Jake Paul's career and the influence he has on society, many people are deeply disturbed that someone who clearly has a very young audience behaves in an irresponsible manner. The role of social media influencer is relatively new. It's a confusing position that strays away from the conventional understanding of what it takes to be a celebrity. Jake Paul doesn't have any notable formal training to do what he does. He consistently makes bad decisions. He has no discernible talent. Now, this is a matter of opinion. I guess one could argue that he has redefined what is considered talent. So what he's doing wasn't considered valuable, and now somehow it is. It seems likely that his behavior is eventually going to land him in serious trouble, if that is not already the case. I think the difficulty with somebody like Paul is that people look at him and think, you have everything going for you. 23 years old and a millionaire, exotic sports cars, you can travel anywhere you want. Why not stop with the childish behavior and start taking your career seriously? Be responsible, pay taxes, don't throw parties where COVID can be transmitted, don't trespass. The difficulty, however, is that these same traits that allowed him to be successful will now potentially doom his success. We've seen this time and time again. Too much fame, too much wealth, too quickly. There is one quote from an interview that sums up his attitude towards success. He said, "As I got more views and more money, in the back of your head, you're like, let's just keep going. We will do whatever we want for content. I would just act and not really care what the result was." There's a reason that the typical path to success takes a long time and involves formal or informal education. People grow, they mature into productive roles. There isn't really a shortcut for this. There's the sense with Jake Paul that a lot of money has been thrown at him, at such a young age, and he has no idea what to do with it. He buys this mansion and fills it with other sensation-seeking young people that want to be like him, which is a scary thought. On top of what this means for Paul, I think people are really worried about the damage he could cause by being a poor role model. He influences a lot of young people. They might look at him and aspire to be like him, something he seems to be connected with based on this business venture of mentoring young influencers. In one way, I think there is a risk of people being influenced by him, but in another way, he's like an anti-hero. I think in the world of social media influencers, fame and notoriety are equally valued, unfortunately. He's found a way to be notorious, and if he discontinues his behavior, he may lose that status. I think the scariest part with Jake Paul is the lack of awareness he demonstrates. He claims that he is now mature. If he's mature now, what was he before? Did he have negative maturity? He also said that he's made a lot of mistakes, but he has all this knowledge now. If one were to think that Jake Paul was frightening the way he was, imagine a Jake Paul who believes he actually knows what he's doing. That large SWAT team is starting to make more sense. What will happen to Jake Paul? I don't know. Some say that the narcissism will burn off. Normally, I agree with this logic. As people mature, if they are narcissistic, they tend to become less narcissistic. But that typically only happens when the narcissistic behavior is not being rewarded. So I guess what it comes down to is, with everything going on, will Jake Paul look at these circumstances and believe that they are good, that he should continue doing what he's been doing, or will he look at the fact that the FBI raided his mansion and think, maybe it's time for a change? Those are my thoughts on the Jake Paul situation. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.